The stove isn't hot, okay, but it's like lukewarm. It's like a mild temperatured stove at the moment. Okay, we do got some stuff to talk about. Scott Harris spoke to the media. We're gonna break down everything he said, what to expect, kind of a little peek behind the curtain, not a big one, but a little bit on what to expect this offseason. And then some more roster moves. Actually, two players we just talked about a few days ago, now no longer on the 40 man, one no longer with the organization. We're going to talk about it. A slew of off-season happenings already going on today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Thursday, November 10th, 2022. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Okay, so as we said in the cold open, we got some things to go over. First and foremost, Scott Harris spoke to the media. If you listened to yesterday's show, you know that he spoke to the media actually more so on Tuesday night, and but with the election and everything that I had to do for work, I was incapable of putting that in yesterday's show, so it's in today's show. Okay, cool. So he did speak. GM meetings are going on in Las Vegas. We did have a trade at the time of this recording. I'm recording this on Wednesday night. And I did say it was Thursday, right? Yeah, I did. I totally got the day right. We're chilling. It was Colby Allard back to Atlanta. If you don't know, Colby Allard's career should have a documentary after it. What a wild career that like no one really talks about. He went from a top 50 prospect in all of baseball. He was the dude, like if you played MLB The Show, he was like one of the A potential pitchers, but he was really highly regarded, really high up. Like I said, top 50 in all of baseball at one point. Made his major league debut at 20 years old for the Atlanta Braves. And then kind of just was never really able to find his footing, traded to Texas for I think it was like Chris Martin, like not a very big like return by any stretch either. And everybody was like, whoa, okay, giving up kind of early. And then he never really did anything great in Texas. I think he has a career ERA of over 5. And then now he's back in Atlanta and they trade him back for Jake Odorizzi. Like just a roller coaster of a career. But so there is some moves happening, but most of the offseason moves happen during winter meetings and not during the GM meetings. The GM meetings is more so of I don't know, you like groundwork on things, or really, to be completely honest with you, the biggest thing that comes out of GM meetings every year is just Scott Boras quotes. Like that's really, if we're just going to be completely honest with ourselves, that's really, I don't think that's what they're for, but like that might be what they're for. He just he stays up all night. He's like a rapper. Like he stays up all night and he writes these crazy rhymes for all of his clients. And then he just goes out there, Carlos Correa, the Dior of defense. Like, like he has to have alliteration with all of his clients and like how good they are, and everybody wants to have a Scott Boras client and everything. Like, that's really the biggest thing. But they're big for the Tigers because this is Scott Harris's first anything. It's not only his first test. It's not only it's literally just the first time we see him make literally any moves. So cool to see. And something fun to keep an eye on for it. They end, I believe, today, as you're listening to this. I think they were the 8th through the 10th. So I believe they end today, but free agency will start as they finish. So that's kind of a cool thing. We talked about Wilson Contreras and really just the entire catcher situation with the Tigers yesterday. And Scott Harris was asked about Willson Contreras because that's what reporters do. That's what the media does. And he basically gave a really GM speak answer where he was like, I'm not going to talk about what our talkings and communications with Contreras have been, but we're looking to upgrade everywhere and be a better baseball team, and catcher is certainly something that we're okay improving in. So that's really all I got on that. Not foremost, first off, medical update. A lot of people are good, which is good, right? No matter what happens with all these dudes going forward, we know for a fact that we have a ton of players. I've explained this before, but really quickly, there by the end of this week, there will be no 60-man IL. You have to assume health. There's no IL during the beginning of the offseason. There's no injured list. And you have to assume health for everyone and put together a 40-man roster before you can put them back on the IL. Even with the moves today that we will get to later, we still have 35 people on the 40-man and like 10 people on the IL. There's still a lot of not cuts necessarily, but moves that need to be made to clear up space on the 40-man roster. But it appears that a vast majority of these dudes are progressing very well. Bo Brisky, symptom-free. Kerry Carpenter taking a good step. Willie Castro, symptom-free. Who else? Joe Jimenez is improving on core strength, and then he will start throwing. They said he'll be fine by spring training. Austin Meadows, symptom-free for the Achilles thing, is great news. Matt Manning, symptom-free. Fantastic news. Spencer Turnbull, symptom-free in November. That means he can have a regular offseason throwing program like nothing was ever wrong. And not even have to ease. He's been easing back into it the last few months, and now he's at a point where it's just a normal throwing program. That's fantastic news. He should be more than ready to go by spring. Tarek Skubal working on grip, and then we'll eventually move to bulking up again. Jake Rogers throwing progression. I don't want to just read down a list here, but the big thing is a lot of these dudes seem to be progressing well, and there was nobody for the first time in what seems to be a calendar year. There was nobody on the injury report that came out and was like, hey, they took a step back. There was no step backs, and I know that that's easy when you don't play games. It's a lot easier to hide if there is a step back, but I don't even care. It's nice to hear. It's nice to have an injury update that doesn't involve 2 to 4 players taking massive step backs and getting pushed down the line, because that's what this entire season was. And a lot of players that are on the 60-day IL are already symptom-free in early November. Nice to hear regardless of anything. I don't care. I'll take it. Maybe I'm gullible. I don't care. I'll gladly take it. It's nice to hear. Okay. So that's really it for the injury front of things. It was just nice to get an update. And as I said, it was nice to hear how everybody individually was doing. They released a statement. You can go find the full list on Twitter. It is out there, just like a PR statement kind of thing on everybody's current situation. Okay, let's get into the Scott Harris interview itself and talk about the substance of what he said, because there's quite a lot to go over, to be honest with you. There's some really intriguing quotes in here, and I love how his brain works so far, and I really want to break it down. So we will get into that right after I tell y'all about our friends over at Simply Safe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Tigers listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. I love Simply Safe, and for a plethora of reasons. First off, in an emergency, they have 24/7 professional monitoring agents that use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify if the threat is real, so you can get priority police response. It's an awesome feature. It's really an all-around just an awesome product. They have sensors they put all over your home. They can detect fire, they can detect flooding, etc. It really is just all around a fantastic product. Their professional monitoring services cost less than $1 a day. That's less than half the price of ADT's traditional professional installed systems. It's the top, you can get the top rated Simply Safe app. You can stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere, arm or disarm, unlocked for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust the settings. You can do it all from your phone. It is really the best out there. So don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. You can get 50% off of any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB. This is their biggest discount of the year. 50% off the entire system. That's crazy. Okay. So don't wait. This is simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB. There's no safe like Simply Safe. What is up, everybody? Welcome back. Segment 2 here. Locked On Tigers. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. For your second listen, check on the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with our local experts and insights only that Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today. It's available on the app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Okay, let's talk about this this Scott Harris media sesh. Okay, there's a lot to go over here. I think first and foremost, this one really is and foremost, just because of the controversy that will ensue after making the comment. Javi Baez will be the opening day shortstop in 2023. That's what year it is. Next year is 2023 for sure. Scott Harris basically came out and said he believes Javi Baez's defensive struggles in 2022 were, quote, an anomaly. Says, we've talked to Javi about it. He's pretty motivated this offseason to get back to being one of the elite defensive shortstops in baseball. Nice to hear, for sure. But that one's not one that I can just go, oh, it's nice to hear and then ignore it. That's one that you're going to have to prove it. And we talked about this when we broke down Javi. We did our deep dive on Javi a few days ago. Was that earlier this week? I think it was. Look, we always knew it was a possibility. That's what you signed him to be. So, I never thought it was likely he was moving to second, I guess is my point. I never thought that was the clubhouse favorite. I never thought the odds were favoring Javi getting moved to second. And I don't think that it's impossible for him to do that, to do what he said. I think it's, I don't want to say likely, but it's definitely not super unlikely either. This is year one of a pretty long-term commitment, barring an opt-out after 2023. And so we're a far way away from being like, oh, this completely failed and this is a terrible contract and this isn't going to work as long as he's on the books. We're so far away from that. He certainly had a lot of struggles. It was brutal. It was brutal. It was unbelievably disappointing. I completely agree. And we talked about this a lot again when we did our breakdown of Javi. But he still has the range. He still has the athleticism. He still has the ability to make amazing plays. And it's really just the throwing errors. It's not like he's booting the ball around all over the infield. He's got great range still. So, do I believe that that's going to happen? I don't know. I hope so. Certainly. We all do, I'm sure. But I'm not holding my breath either way. This is what I expected to happen. This is not a shock to me. This is not something that I have to adjust my mindset to for the rest of the offseason. I don't have to go, oh, crap. Well, this changes everything. Javi's going to stay at short and not move to second. I never thought that was likely. It was possible, but never likely. So this is just really, okay, business as usual, I guess. We have a lot of holes on this team. A ton of holes offensively, especially on this team. Javi, all he has to do defensively is just have less throwing errors. And then offensively, we talked about in the breakdown as well, if he gets the power back and all the other numbers stay the exact same, you're talking about a much different player as well. And I'm not saying that's easy to just overnight get better at those things either. That's certainly something he has to put in work for, but not impossible. We've seen him do it year in and year out. Okay. So Javi Baez will be the shortstop, it sounds like, on opening day of 2023. A lot of other cool stuff to talk about, though. So we'll move on from that. I think the most fascinating thing to me was when he talked about position-specific needs. He said, we could use another left-handed bat in the infield and a right-handed outfielder. Now, what you have to know about Scott Harris is that when he was in San Francisco, he, especially in 2021, is like when it really kind of caught wind and the media started talking about it a little bit. But when he was in San Francisco, he did a really, really, I don't want to say groundbreaking. Like I don't want to make it, and who knows who the brainchild was behind the entire thing. But the Giants, I'll just put it that way. Not necessarily that Scott Harris did it, but the Giants did a thing where righty lefty was super important to them for matchups against opposing pitchers, and they would evaluate bat path and the plane of your swing. Okay, and they would evaluate it, and then based on the opposing pitcher, that's how they would determine their lineup every day. Was okay, this is this pitcher's stuff. This is where he's going to throw a majority of his pitches or whatnot. This is how his pitches move. And we are going to formulate our lineup based on the players whose bat path and bat plane can most give us success against this pitcher's stuff and location, which is a fascinating concept. And they won 109 games, 107 games. So like, even, and I know this season they were not nearly as good and didn't even make the postseason, and everybody views it as a one-off thing. They won over 100 games. Okay? One-off season or not, I don't care. Clearly it worked a little bit. And it's just fascinating to then hear him say, you know, he didn't go into he didn't dissect the bat paths of available players out there, but left-handed infielder and right-handed outfielder. Looking at the outfield for this team currently, it is objectively like all lefties, especially now that Daz is gone, which we'll get to in the third segment. It's all Meadows, Green, Badu. Victor Reyes is a switch hitter. Who knows what his future is? It's all lefties, dog, right? So I think that makes sense. And the fortunate thing about that is that there are way more righties than lefties, right? So you have, in theory, a much bigger pool. It's a lot more. It's a lot easier to need right-handed hitting than left-handed hitting, is my point. It's a lot easier to look around and go, we need to add a righty to this lineup than it is we need to find a lefty. And then a lot of lefties are even more so just like platoon guys. Like that was a really popular thing for like a decade. And it's kind of, it's still like kind of a thing. And the Giants did a lot of platooning as well. So it's cool to hear. I'm totally down with it. And I think, honestly, I don't know. I guess it kind of depends on your opinion of Akil Badu, on what your opinion of how prevalent this mysterious right-handed outfielder should be in the lineup. Is this everyday player? Is this a prominent everyday corner outfielder or even center fielder like we've talked about before? Or is this more of a platoon for Badu and like Meadows and Green will play every day and then this guy will be, or is it just we have to evaluate the market and whichever one of those two we end up with is what we'll end up with? I don't know the answer, obviously. We will see. But it's kind of exciting just to hear him talk about it in that regard, because I follow that logic. I subscribe to that. So then on the flip side, he also said a left-handed infielder, which kind of ties into another comment he made a little bit later. And we'll get into all of that. We'll keep the train rolling right after this. Okay. Hello. Third and final segment. Locked On Tigers. So you already can tell just based on what Scott Harris is saying. We're just jumping back into it, by the way. You can already kind of tell that he's going to play a lot more matchup ball like he did in San Francisco, like the Giants did, which is great. I love that. Give yourself the best chance to win every single game. I don't care if you have to platoon 9 spots. I don't care. I want a winning team. And if that's what leads to that, then let's do it. We've been archaic in that in the front office during the Avila era. So it's a nice change of pace. Even if you don't think it'll work or you think it's absurd or stupid or whatever, let's at least give it a try because it's different, eh? Why not? Okay. So left-handed infielder. I think that's fascinating for 2 reasons. One, it makes sense currently because Eric Haas, righty, Jake Rogers, righty, Spencer Torkelson, righty, Scope, righty, Baez, righty, Candy, switch hitter. Okay. Now, Scope, iffy for next season. Baez, definitely here next season. Haas, here next season. Rogers will be on the 40-man, but where will he play in the organization? Don't know. Candy, heavily iffy next season. Like, legitimate chance we have an episode, by the end of this week or beginning of next week where we talk about Candy leaving. That's a legitimate possibility. And then Torkelson, that's where it gets super fascinating to me. So you do have an infield of all righties. I understand you want a lefty infielder, not a specific position, but a lefty infielder. That's why, again, I go back to players like Brandon Drury who can play multiple positions. And I know righty-lefty I'm just talking about versatility, not the righty-lefty part of it. But I think that the versatility in which he talks about infielders and outfielders and not, I want a lefty first baseman or I want a lefty second base, whatever, right? I think he's a big versatility. And we already know AJ Hinch is. AJ Hinch, we've had players on the show and talk about how they meet AJ Hinch and one of the first things he says is learn how to play other positions. Like, we know that that's AJ's favorite thing. So I think Scott Harris subscribes to that too, and that's why we're getting more generalized positional groups than specifics. And with matchups, again, we just went around the horn. You need a lefty. I think then tying that into the first base discussion is fascinating because he made comments about first base and essentially he said long-term, we are not concerned with first base. And Spencer Torkelson, we think, is a long-term option at first base. This season specifically, however, he said we could look at, I don't want to put words in his mouth. It was a lot of GM speak, but I took it as long-term, Torkelson's the guy. This year, we might pick somebody up. Whether that's a stopgap because we think Torque needs another year to marinate and develop in the minors, or really, I don't even think it's that necessarily as much as it is just we don't want what happened last year to happen again, in the sense that we don't want to look around in June and have our first baseman have an OPS in the 500s and go, oh crap, we don't have a safety valve or an alternative option. And so I think he's going to, again, infielders, I think he's going to look at players that can play first and third or for multiple positions, first and corner outfield even. I have a hard time believing they're going to bring in somebody. Well, no, I could. It really depends on their analysis and current opinion of Spencer Torkelson and how close to ready they think he is. But I think they want to go with versatility, and they clearly want lefty infield, righty outfield, and that makes total sense. Because again, your infield is pretty much all righties right now, and your outfield is pretty much all lefties right now. So you got to play matchups a little bit better. And I love that. I love that forward thinking. It's progressive thinking. I'm a big fan, and I'm really excited about what type of moves they can pull off. Only other noteworthy things was asked about Andrew Chafin, said that they're in contact with the agent still, said that it wasn't out of the question for him to come back. Sure. We talked about that twice now in the last week. So you can go find those episodes and hear us discuss, what's going to happen with Chafin going forward. I don't think it's a top priority for this front office. However, if they brought him back, obviously I would welcome it because he's one of the better relievers and one of the better lefty relievers in the American League. So yeah, I'm down, but I don't think it's as high of a priority as maybe some people think. I don't even know if people really think it is. I just don't think it's a very high priority. The other thing is, I think the only other thing I really want to talk about is Comerica Park dimensions were brought up. And his exact quote said, "We're looking at everything. I don't have an update to share on that. I know how the pitchers feel about the dimensions. I know how the hitters feel. And there's a strong difference of opinion between those two groups." Shocker. The pitchers love it. The batters hate it. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That's very much on the back burner of my brain. That is not a pressing issue that I think about on a daily basis. I think every single day about how this team is going to get better, how it's possible for this team to get better, what moves they could make. My brain goes a million miles an hour all the time. I have a hard time relaxing. Okay. But the Comerica Park dimensions are not one of those. We had that conversation in the middle of the season, I think. And I said, look, they could leave it. They could move it in 10 feet. I'm really okay. I'm fine with either of those. I will go to sleep fine. I don't want them moving in a ton. I don't want to be PNC Park all of a sudden and have 399 to dead center. But that whatever they decide, I'm gonna be able to live with and be fine with. And including leaving it how it is. I like my niche deepest park in baseball field. Okay. I'm not big against it, but that is something that they're discussing clearly. So something to keep in mind as the season goes on. We'll see if maybe a change is made. I have a hard time believing, even if it's not this season, like 5-10 years from now, that it's still the same exact dimensions that it is today. But we'll see. Like I said, on the back burner, really, for me. And that's kind of it for his comments. There's a huge breakdown that Cody Stavenhagen of The Athletic did, where I think he said he emptied his notebook on GM meetings. So he just wrote down and everything that happened and everything that Scott Harris talked about and broke down. So that's a great article. You can go read that. Our beat writers really are great, and Cody's one of the best for sure. So you can check that out if you want more of a deep dive on all of his comments. Okay, so now the last order of business is Daz Cameron and Josh Lester. So this was something that was rather timely in regards to this show because we just talked about it earlier this week. Was it earlier this week? I think it was. Earlier, I think so. There's no way it was yesterday, right? No. Whatever. Very recently, we talked about Josh Lester, and no, it definitely wasn't yesterday. I think it was 2 days ago. Regardless, Daz Cameron claimed off waivers by the Baltimore Orioles. Josh Lester cleared waivers out ready to AAA Toledo. Okay, so what does this mean? Neither of them are on the 40-man. Clearly, Daz Cameron's not with the organization anymore. We'll get to that in a second. Josh Lester is still in the organization for the time being, but he is no longer on the 40-man roster. He is just he's a Toledo Mudhen, and he's not on the 40-man. And I think that it'll probably stay that way if they plan on holding on to him and keeping him in Toledo for next season and keeping him through this offseason. It will not be on the 40-man roster. We talked about that. He's, like I said, love the dude. I think his story is great, but I think that he was always going to be one of the first players to get removed from the 40-man this offseason, and he was. So now we get to Daz Cameron. This was one that we we said what happened, and I got, you know, people disagree with everything, and there are certainly everyone has a right to their own opinion. Daz Cameron, look, his situation was, and I know people are gonna right now in this moment. Oh my, well, honestly, it wasn't as bad as I thought. I thought when they announced this that the fan base was gonna freak out and be like kind of similar ish to what happened when they DFA'd Derek Hill. I think that I thought that that was gonna happen. And it was going to be a situation where everybody looked around and was like, oh my goodness, like this was a uh, highly regarded prospect at one point, and oh, like he didn't get an opportunity and all this. And I we talked about it when we did our analysis and our breakdown on Daz Cameron earlier this week, but I gotta say, I think that this is good for both sides. That's how I'll put it. I really like Daz Cameron. Um, Baseball family, Mike Cameron, one of my favorite players growing up, to be honest with you. Uh, Daz, part of the Verlander trade, already kind of a target on his back because of that, and just under a microscope within this fan base. It's been, he didn't hit. That's really what it comes down to. He didn't hit. And I understand the crowd that thinks that he should have gotten more of an opportunity at the major league level. I totally understand that. And I don't disagree with you, honestly. I don't. I agree. I agree with that. He should have gotten more of a look at the major league level in 2022. I'm with it. But he had an OPS of barely over 700 in AAA this season. Like, it's not like he was tearing the cover off the ball and we just had a dude that was OPSing 900 in AAA and just didn't bring him up. No, he had an over 800 OPS in 2021, but he's never hit well at the majors at any point. And he got at-bats in 2020, got some at-bats in 2021, and got some at-bats early on in 2022 and never hit well in any of his stints in the major leagues. And in January, I think, next year will be his age 26 season. And you're trying to clear 40-man roster spots. Again, there is a lot of clearing that needs to be done for all these players on the IL. And there's a lot of clearing that needs to be done for these acquisitions that are come in. And just we're trying to raise the talent level. And I wish Daz nothing but the best. I truly will always root for that kid. He played his heart out, heck of a competitor, and showed flashes over the years. He showed flashes, and I truly wish him nothing but the best, and will always root for him. But this is it. This is the change that we talked about and that we foreshadowed and that we talked about, a month and a half ago. We've been talking about this big change, and this is tip of the iceberg stuff. This is not, Daz Cameron was the big, we had to rip the Band-Aid off and Daz Cameron's gone and, that was a tough decision, but okay, that was the tough decision. No, this is the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot of people that are going to be let go from this 40-man roster or this organization in general over the next week and a half. I think the 18th is the non-tender deadline. And most of them probably won't even wait till that long. Baltimore, I think it's a decent fit, honestly. I think it's a nice opportunity for him to start fresh because it was pretty clear that he wasn't in the future plan for the Tigers because of the lack of opportunity he got at the major league level this season. I think that message was kind of sent. And if he crushes it and ends up being a solid major leaguer, good on him. I hope so. I truly do. But I think that this was a point where both sides were ready to move on. And I think that that's what happened. Baltimore, I kind of like it. I really do kind of like it. outfield depth for a team that's on the come up too, like played competitive baseball at the end of the season this year. I think there's some room there for him to make noise, and that's outfield depth is something that team kind of needed down the stretch too. So I'm all about it. I really like the fit for, and again, it was the right move for the Tigers too. Don't get it twisted. I think this was good for everybody involved, which you can't really ask for too much more than that in this world. So, um, yeah, Daz Cameron, Baltimore Oriole. Again, it was time. It was time. Um, that leaves Jake Rogers as the only player on the 40 man from the Verlander trade, which is a totally different conversation that we're not going to rehash right now at the end of this episode. We're going to try and end positive. But that trade looks better and better every day, don't it? So, what to expect going forward? We'll end on that. Thursday, well, you can expect the mayhem to kind of start on Thursday. I think Thursday night is when you will start seeing a lot of the stories and the mayhem start, like after 5 p.m., like which is pitch black in Michigan now, outside. So I think that's when you're going to start seeing a lot of noise happen and the hot stove really heat up. And then this weekend might be where some legitimate moves start happening. So exciting times. Exciting times. We'll be back tomorrow. Final episode of the week. We'll send you into the weekend with something, hopefully, some fun news or some big news or more moves on the 40 man or whatever. But that's what this is going to be. There's a lot of players left that still need to be trimmed off this 40 man. And even just on a basis of we need to get these players that are on the IL on the roster, you also gotta trim off for new acquisitions you get, and then also just players that you don't think have a future with the team that just didn't perform well. And there's plenty of those too. So buckle up because we're just getting started. Believe that. We're just getting started. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every day. For your next listen, check on the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast, just like us. I think that's all I got. You all rock. Love talking to y'all about baseball. My favorite part of the day, every day. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.